Welcome. We'll just give you a few minutes for people to join in before we start. Okay, I think the numbers stop growing now. Okay, so welcome to the Masters in Architecture Degree Apprenticeship information session. Before we start, I would like to let you know that this session will be recorded and will be shared on the ICE YouTube channel later on. The recording will also be sent to all those who register for this session. My name is Vanessa Chiliemi, and I'm Head of Academic Centre Administration at the Institute of Continuing Education at the University of Cambridge, also known as ICE. Today in the panel, we have Professor Timothy Britton-Catlin, Course Leader for the MSc Architecture Degree Apprenticeship, Andy Bowden, Deputy Director, Academic Centres Division, Susanna Lewis, our Academic Centre Coordinator, Gregor Ferguson, our current apprentice in the programme, and we are also being supported by colleagues from the enrolments and marketing team. Next slide, please. This week, we are running a variety of online sessions to give you the opportunity to find out more about the Masters at the University of Cambridge Institute of Continuing Education. Course information sessions like this one, covering each course in our Masters portfolio, have been taking place at 6:30 every evening. In addition to our live sessions, we also have additional video resources on our website, giving you further information on matters such as application, funding options, college matriculation, student support, and lots more information. So do please have a look on our website. If you missed any of our sessions or are unavailable to attend, then you can watch the recordings, which will be available on our website. Links to the events and resources are shared in the chat and will also be sent via email after the session. Next slide, please. Let me tell you a bit about ICE. ICE was established just over 150 years ago in 1873, and we were the first university-led continuing education provider in the world. Today, we offer a wide range of courses to other learners, including short online and residential weekend courses, international summer programs, and part-time undergraduate and postgraduate qualifications, covering a number of subject areas from archaeology to genomic medicine. We also act as the meeting body for our MSc courses, for all MSc courses within the University of Cambridge, with our MSc students becoming members of a Cambridge college upon commencement of the course. ICE is a place where professional networks are formed, friendships are made, and the transformative power of learning is recognized. Next slide, please. So let's talk about college partnerships. Once you have accepted an offer, you will become a member of a University of Cambridge College, which will run to the same level of support as full-time university students. As well as having access to the standard college resources, you will be allocated a college tutor who is responsible for your welfare and pastoral support. Your college will also confirm arrangements such as university cards, matriculation, and graduation events. We work with a number of different colleges across our MSc courses, and the MSc in Architecture course specifically works very closely with Homerton College. If you already have an existing affiliation with a different college, you will be able to state this in your application. Please do join us today at 7:30 for our Meet the Colleges session. That is straight after this event, and the link will be in the chat. If the session in that session, you will find more information about college partnerships, and you will hear from the colleges themselves. Next slide, please. So, what are we going to be covering today? As I mentioned earlier, in the panel today, we have myself, Vanessa Chiliemi, Head of Academic Centre Administration, Professor Timothy Britton-Catlin, Course Leader for the course, Andy Bowden from our apprenticeships team, Susan Lewis from the management team of the course, Coordinator for Academic Centres, and Gregor, current apprentice in the programme. Shortly, we will take you through what you can expect from the MSc in Architecture, including entry requirements, teaching style, module content, and assessment. My colleague Andy Bowden from the apprenticeships team will take you through what kind of support we can provide you during your application, and you will also hear from one of our current students. We have, at the end of the session, we have some time reserved for questions and answers. So please do send us your questions on the questions and answer button at the bottom of this screen. I will now hand you over to my colleague, Professor Timothy Britton-Catley, course leader for the course. So Tim, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vanessa, and thank you very much to everybody for joining us this evening. Let's move forward to the next slide. A couple of basic things first. So one more slide forward, please. That's it. The basic facts. First of all, this is a course that is prescribed by the Architects Registration Board. So those who complete the course successfully will move on to do the endpoint assessment, which is the apprenticeship name essentially for the part 3. And on completing that, you then become a registered architect. Now, the big difference between applying for this course and many other courses is that, of course, it is essentially your employer that is in the first instance applying on your behalf. So it's very important to speak to directors in your practice and have a chat with them about about your interest in joining the apprenticeship. You can always put them on to me. I'm always delighted to talk to anybody about the course and what it offers and what our employers will gain from it. We organised the course in a way that we arrived at following discussions with many architectural practices in London right at the very start, so about 5 years ago. What we do is the following thing. We bring our apprentices to Cambridge for 3 fortnights a year to work mostly on small group projects. And it's those projects which I'm going to show you after I've finished this introduction. So you come here, you're a member of a college, as Vanessa correctly said. That college for 2025 will be Homerton College. And it's very important to bear in mind the fact that what you will be is a Cambridge graduate student exactly the same as everybody else. The fact that you're an apprentice doesn't make you anything less of a Cambridge graduate student. The formal name for this level of apprenticeship is level 7. That's the equivalent of a master's. On completing the course, you will have, in addition to your registration as an architect, you will have an MST, which is the type of master's degree which Cambridge awards to courses like this one. There is a long time ahead until the application deadline. That's the 30th of April 2025. You've got plenty of time to talk about it, to have a conversation with me, to think of any questions that might arise, any practical questions. I'm delighted to say that Gregor Ferguson, one of our current apprentices, is with us this evening. So there may well be questions that you might want to put direct to him while he's with us. Let's move forward one more, and I'll say a little bit about the structure of the course. So what we do is that we have a series of modules which are aimed at very specific outcomes. Everybody comes to us for the first fortnight, which is a series of talks by people with 1 foot in architecture and 1 foot in research. So that's a series of conversations with people from the world of architectural history and theory, but also from infrastructure, for example, from material science, from oral history, and from many other different aspects. Many of our speakers are members of the Department of Architecture, which is where everything takes place, in the centre of the town. So we can draw on the expertise of some world-leading experts in many areas. We had, for example, Professor Emily So talking about earthquakes over the last couple of years, and that's somebody you will often hear on the radio talking about the implications for architecture of earthquakes. So first of all, there's this first session on history, theory, and research methods. That's in the September of the first year, and in December, it's followed by the first of the 5 design modules. And what we do is we take you through all the different stages of the range of experience that you need to have in order to be an architect. In the technical language, we're taking you through the ARB criteria. So in other words, we're making sure that everything is covered. And the way in which we do this is we start with a module that is about, it uses an urban design project as a vehicle, essentially, for learning how to approach brief and program construction and precedent studies, but at the same time, it's accompanied by training in teamwork by a teamwork specialist who has a background in architecture. And that's in order to ensure that all members of every design group are fully aware of the dynamics of working in a group, because working in a group is very important for these sessions. They're fairly intensive sessions. Gregor can say a word about that perhaps, but at the end of it, you emerge with a very large amount of very high quality work. So the second one is the team working one. The third one is led by members of the Centre for Natural Material Innovation, who are members of the Department of Architecture. They usually set a project which will introduce you to, for example, embodied carbon calculations and some of no, I wouldn't say basics, but the advanced basics in environmental design. In the second year, the three remaining design modules are, first of all, a facade design module, secondly, an urban design module, which is led by Procter & Matthews and will be this coming year again, and then finally, a sustainable building module, which is a very complex one. But the fact that everybody has been through a sequence of modules which increases and steps up your skills at every point means that you will find that you will be able to work at a very high standard and very fast by the end of that one. In the third year, there are two modules. One is your individual design project, working to a program set by you, led currently by Charles Holland. And alongside that, there is the modules in management, practice and law. What we do with that is we get going on the part 3 level teaching whilst you're still doing the part 2. There's a strange situation at the moment. It will change, as we know. There's a strange situation at the moment where you study at part 3, you do an easy part 2 exam, and then you do the proper part 3 exam once you're through the masters. So let's go on to the next one. We'll see a series of pages from different projects. So this one comes from module 2. Module 2 is the precedent and brief preparation study. This is led by Eric Martin of Allies and Morrison, who's based himself on this site, actually, in central Cambridge, with Tim Foreman as the teamwork specialist, in groups of 5, usually, who can produce a very large amount of information, survey information, brief preparation study, surveys and research into client bodies and so on, and carry out the essential exercises in precedents. Now, what I'd say here, before we move on to module 3, is that what happens is this: you work on a group project whilst you're with us. An apprenticeship allows you about 12 more days a year in which to work on the university projects. And what you will be doing in those 12 days is you individualize your projects so that you have your own personal version of it. One reason for that is so that you can respond to feedback at the crit, from the office, from anybody else. You are your own boss as a graduate, as a Cambridge graduate student. You're independent. You take advice from whom you want. So that's one thing. It enables you to develop your scheme and think about it a bit after the event and without the pressure of the intensive timetable of the fortnight. The second thing is that it also enables you to show that you are completely proficient in a particular area, because at the end of every year, the external examiners approve your progress, and that means that your employers can easily see what it is that you can now do that you couldn't do before you start. Now, these days, which you yourselves work on outside the university residentials, it's you, the apprentice, who fixes the dates for those, together with your employer, with your line manager, with your project leader, whoever it is that's in charge of you. That's in order to give a great deal of versatility to employers, so that you're not out of the office every week, come what may, that you can schedule your university working days so that they don't fall at inconvenient moments. Instead of working, for example, for a day in January and a day in February, you might just do something very minimal in January, and in February do a couple of days. There is a great deal of versatility to it, which gets out of the some of the difficulties of the day release system. Now, let's move on to the next one, the third module. The third module is the one that is led by Dr. Darshil Shah, Dr. Antiope Koronaki. This is a project which generally requires the design of a structure from natural materials which will rise and fall with rising sea levels, changing water levels, based, of course, on real sites around the coast in England. you can see that this is also the first introduction to sophisticated forms of construction sequences, but it's also your first introduction to most of the environmental design principles, which run all the way through the course to the beginning. We've got a couple more slides on this. Let's move on to the next one. So here you can see the calculations are beginning, and the analysis is beginning of what the materials are, what the buoyancy force is, what the weight of the structure is, how it will move, how it will change, and so on. And the first introduction really to seeing the big picture of your responsibility as somebody who both chooses materials and designs systems which respond to the requirements of the natural environment. One more, I think, on this one, and you can see one of the structures that was designed as part of this module. So that's the first year. That then ends round about Easter. In the first academic year, you then have quite a bit of time to prepare your first year portfolio for the external examiners. You then have the summer, and you come back the following September, and you start on a very substantial module. Let's move on to the next one, Module 4. Module 4 is called Facade Design. It's a module that we devised. We set this up right at the very start as something new. It's obviously part of the bigger picture of environmental sustainability and environmental design. At the same time, it enables an in-depth exploration of the structure of a building and also the structure of the details of the building. As with all our projects, they are always accompanied by a level of research. You'd expect that in a Cambridge Masters course. This one is the first sheet that is related to a project that was based in Baker Street, in fact, one of the old Marks and Spencer's building. I'm not sure if it's still there. And the apprentices here used their knowledge about researching historical background of a building and a site in order to create this first page. Let's have the next slide then. Matt, now I put this up, not necessarily to alarm people who are not particularly excited by the idea of lots of calculations, but it shows you that this is a construction structural module. Now, there are some people whom that will alarm a bit. So let me say right away, you are working in small groups. We will always organize groups so that somebody in that group at least, and probably two, have got more specialist knowledge in one of these areas than others. It means that you can learn very easily by working in a small group with others who are already slightly more advanced. But of course, it goes without saying that there is a tutor, Francesco Incelli, who will be following what you're doing and will be with you for the whole of the fortnight and ensuring that you can rise up through the stages of learning how to go through these different processes. Another very nice thing about working in small groups, we find, is that apprentices are not only learning from each other, for example, new software skills or new technical skills or straightforward aspects of knowledge that they might not have had before. You also get to learn a bit about what it's like to be an architect in a completely different type of office. We have architects who come from practices that specialize in small residential works, in barn conversions, in church reorderings, for example. We have apprentices from major national practices who are mostly doing large-scale commercial work, infrastructure work in Greg's case. So you also get to build up a picture over the 3 years of what architectural practice is like and what the challenges are like for people who come from different directions in it. Let's have another one from Module 4, and you can see there's now just a series of 3 images which start to show the level of detail that the apprentices arrived at after a fortnight. So here you start to see the mullions taking shape and then the connections between the mullions and the windows, as well as some of the performance data. Next one will show us a bit more. There we go. Here's some of the structural calculations of the elements of the new facade. What Francesco Incelli usually does is he takes an existing building which is failing in performance terms, where it might be a steel structure, or it could easily be a concrete one from 30, 40 years ago, and redesigns the front of it. So here is some of the detailed work. And then finally, one last one with the final image from that project is to show how the different components are fit together. You can see from this that it's possible to build up a very high level of knowledge and skill in a specialist area. Now we've got a few slides from Module 5. Module 5 is taught by Proctor & Matthews. over the course of the fortnight, what everybody generally does is they spend the first week researching the planning history, background, the landscape, the infrastructure, the connections, the bridleways in some cases, usually of one of the small towns outside Cambridge. We work together with members of the Greater Cambridge Planning Service so that we have access to the relevant data that everyone knows. And for anybody who is working in the office in residential planning and urban planning of any sort, this will take you very thoroughly, step by step, through the different phases of research and analysis in order to arrive at a new plan. Now, what very often happens in these projects, it was the case with this one, is that what you will be designing is an extension to an existing village. In last year's one, actually, which we don't show here, in last one, it turned out that there is an estate from the 1970s by Ralph Erskine in Newmarket, which was never really properly finished. And the aim of the project was to complete Ralph Erskine's vision for the scheme and to tie the estate back into the life of the rest of the town. It had been cut off by an industrial estate and by the roads going the wrong directions, by the green and public areas never being properly developed. It had developed the true British characteristic of large numbers of back garage yards, which were very unappealing ways to arrive at your house. And what the apprentices did was that they re-evaluated it. They looked at Erskine's original vision for the site, and they redesigned it. Let's move on to a few more. This is a different site. Again, it's just outside Cambridge. So you will go through the different phases of recording the landscape in the immediate area, recording the way and the history of the settlement, the way in which it's grown naturally, exploring the links, the green links through routes, the infrastructure connections and so on. Then one more, and what you will see now, apprentices are beginning to build up a new urban area. It's very much at this point in the form of a series of sketches, but each different possibility is explored by different members of the group and so on. Everyone puts their heads together in the middle of the second week and they begin to come up with a final plan for the area. Next one, please. Here is a view of the proposed development by one of the groups with a series of images which acted as precedents in different ways along the top there. And then the next one is, I think, not quite the final one. Here they are putting together not only the routes, but they're beginning to indicate the edge markers, the main green routes through it, the main streets, the connections with the rest of the settlement and so on. And then one more, this is the final one on module 5. That's a very nice little drawing of one of the newly designed groups. Now, of course, after this, as with every project, once you've done this, you go back, you think about it a bit more, you show your project at work, you hear what everyone's responses are. On top of everything that you may have done from the creative point of view in the university, which of course is enormously important for your development of your career as an architect. On top of all that, the fact is that you will at this point understand all the basic tools for design of any residential area or any urban expansion area, which is an area which not only are many people currently engaged with, but which of course we all foresee there will be a great deal more demand for over the coming years. Next one, please. We'll look at module 6. Module 6 is the last of the group modules. Now, at this point, because of the certainly 2 previous modules, 3 and 4, at this point, all apprentices will be able to approach the evaluation of existing structures and their materials in pretty fast, very effectively, and very efficiently. This is one of a series of images from a really fantastic presentation which was created over, rather unbelievably, only 8 days, because this was a 9-day residential instead of a 10-day one because of the Easter bank holidays. And what apprentices did was they took a building on the Ring Road in Cambridge, on West Road in Cambridge, East Road. What is it called? One of the two. East Road. And it's a building from the 1980s. It's a very ordinary steel framed building with brick cladding on, sitting on concrete pads. They evaluated what the materials are. Now, we are very aware, and we've known this from the start of this, from this course in 2020, that one of the key aims that everyone needs to strive to is to make the most of the existing buildings where they currently instead of redeveloping them where possible, or at any rate, understanding what the decisions are and what the assessment is in order to arrive at a logical and environmentally sustainable solution for redeveloping it. So here they are looking at what the building is already made of, and some of that stuff is going to be reused in the next building. The next one, please, and you'll see a bit how this builds up. This was a very substantial presentation. You can see here the massing development, the analysis and various forms of performance analysis. The site analysis, of course, was carried out. There's a master plan for the area by Christorfen and Wright. Noise, green spaces, pollution, sound, and so on. And on the bottom right, they're taking the structural analysis through the Field and Clegg Bradley system. There's a question that's come up as to, do we cover retrofit as part of sustainability? Yes, it's very substantial. You're seeing it now in Module 6. You saw it earlier in Module 4. So yes, right from the start, this was always intended to be a key part of this course. At the end of this project, let's go forward just a few more, see a few more pages out of the 139 that they produced. This is a very nice piece of work. Now, this module was led by Kirsten Haggart of Wall Thistleton, the architect of some of the most remarkable timber buildings, including in the City of London. And here you can see an analysis of the desirability and the priorities of the different types of space going along the top. Against the solar access, the daylight, the ventilation, and so on, so that everybody is very clear in their own minds about what precisely they're aiming for through the retrofit of the building and what they're going to arrive at. Onto the next one. And you can see a bit of analysis about the existing materials or materials nearby on the site, in one case from other buildings that are being demolished or being remodeled in some way. So everybody went through that very thoroughly. And as you can see from the figures provided, that this is a very high level of analysis. The next one shows a small study. I think it was probably a half-day study into the facade weight and the embodied carbon of the different types of cladding solution that are going onto this building. So what they eventually decided to do, what they're able to do at the end, was to decide how much of the existing structure could be retained, what was viable to retain, and how much needed to be added, and in what form, what structural form it would be added. One more forward, and we can see the fire strategy. All our projects incorporate all the latest set of ARB requirements, and we are ready for the change in the ARB's syllabus, I suppose is probably the right word. We already cover fire strategy, for example. We already cover many of the aspects of building safety, and in this module, they are developed to a very high level. There's, I think, one more of this one, Module 6. This was an overall drawing to show all the principal factors at play in the design of the building. The 5 members of this group presented their project on the last day, and everybody was staggered by it, I have to say. I mean, by I say everybody, I mean the professional assessors were staggered by it. It was at least the level that you would expect from an experienced project architect who'd been asked to go away by the directors and come back in 2 weeks with some ideas. It was very much that level. It was pretty astonishing, I think. We entered this one for the Architecture Today Student Award. They had an Environmental Design Student Award. Okay, so that was Module 6. Now, in the final year, I mentioned that that's when you'll be doing management, practice, and law. But on top of that, you have the opportunity to design your own project. We are very likely to change this slightly so that it's a bit more structured in future and to fix a particular site. But in the projects that you'll see here, apprentices were choosing their own site. This was a project by an apprentice, Eleanor Lee. We entered this one for the RIBA Silver Medal Award on behalf of the Department of Architecture. It's the first time that the department has entered an apprentice for the award. We intend to do it every year from now onwards. The apprenticeship part 2 is rather substantially bigger, in fact, than the full-time part 2 in the department. So it's a perfectly reasonable thing to do. Eleanor is a long-standing brass band member, and she designed here a school for brass band players on a site which was partly a disused colliery site near where she lives in Yorkshire. That's her introductory image of her structure. Let's have the next view of Eleanor's. There's a general drawing showing the form of the building and some of the ideas behind the construction of it. Now the next one, and you can see some of her detailing for it, big views, large views, construction views, and so on. By the time you get to the final project, every apprentice will be able, for sure, to carry out all the technical aspects of the design, and they can concentrate a bit more on some of the bigger picture stuff about the kind of things that architects should be doing. Let me just show you, by way of contrast, before introducing Gregor, I'd just like to show you two more images from a very different type of project. This was by Jay Watts. Jay Watts was the winner of the Department of Architecture's first apprentice prize. He was part of our very first cohort. He works for Rogers Stirk Harbour, and what he did as his final project was a series of small, extremely finely detailed structures for measuring the climate on St Kilda and the far west of the British Isles. So this is one of the plans of one of his structures. One more forward, and that's the final one from me, and that's the digital model that Jay created. So of course I'll be ready here for any questions that anybody has at the end, but that gives you a picture of the level of skill and the range of skills that our apprentices pick up. Gregor, may I introduce you? You'll get your own slide now. There it is.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Tim. Thanks for having me. I'm Greg. I work at WWP Architects, and I'm in my second year of the apprenticeship. So I'm between module 4 and module 5. I suppose so. I've been asked to talk to you about what it's like to be an apprentice, and I think there's lots of things I could say, and lots of things I could say about why you might want to do an apprenticeship. I'm sure you'll have your reasons if you're on this call today. So from kind of my perspective, I studied my undergraduate at Bath. I joined just before graduating, actually. So I joined WWP, and you know I'd been working at the practice for about a year when I started to think about part 2 opportunities, and I asked if the practice would be willing to sponsor me as an apprentice. And I suppose there's a range of reasons why I kind of went down that route, and I think a lot of them are quite prosaic and practical. One of them was quite simply that I'd been working for a year, and you get used to a kind of independent lifestyle and earning a salary, and I think a big part really about apprenticeships, not just at Cambridge, but generally, is that you can continue to live that lifestyle, and in my instance, stay in London. I don't have parents who live within commuting distance where I work, so that allowed me to kind of stay where I was, and I think it's an important aspect, even if it's not related to the kind of course content. Of course, there are other advantages too. One is you can become an architect while working, and I suppose it's natural to compare the apprenticeship model to a standard part 2. I can't speak to what a standard part 2 or full-time part 2 is like, but I suppose the apprenticeship is probably, you'll notice, is more skills focused. The residentials that we do are incredibly fun and intensive in a way that kind of engages your whole brain. But I think what you'll notice is you go away for 2 weeks and you learn quite a specific skill that or range of skills, which in my case dovetailed quite well with the work I was doing at Weston Williamson. And yeah, I suppose another aspect too is that you might gain experience in work stages or sectors that you're not used to in practice. So my practice is quite a specific one. We primarily do infrastructure, transport and infrastructure projects and bridges. In fact, in my first year of practice, I had worked almost exclusively on concrete bridges for HS2. So you know, coming to Cambridge and spending 2 weeks doing well, in the first module it was an essay, but spending 2 weeks on a master plan or brief development is a nice kind of break away from the kind of work you get used to doing in practice. So yeah, I suppose, what's it like to be an apprentice? It's really fun. I think kind of going from work to Cambridge for 2 weeks, it kind of it feels like a little holiday, except it kind of, you realize, I think you start to miss it when you're at work, and then when you go to the residential, you kind of realize that actually the residential is probably harder than work. But yeah, it's an incredibly kind of enjoyable, rewarding experience. I think at the end of the 2 weeks, I feel quite fried. You know, you're constantly negotiating with your peers and making decisions really quickly, and you have to produce a lot. And then of course present it at the end. So yeah, it's really tiring, but yeah, so far it's been a great experience. So yeah, I think that was all I really wanted to say. I'm hoping there'll be questions at the end, so I'll stick around to answer those. But thank you very much.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Greg. That
Gregor.
was...
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, you
Vanessa.
can't do.
No, thank you. That was really insightful and helpful. So I'm Dr. Andy Borden. I lead the Apprenticeships Administration Office, and so I'm here to talk to you about application support, but I'm also going to speak a little bit about how kind of apprenticeship compliance kind of colours, if you like, your experience of the programme. I promise not to talk about that for too long, because I don't think anyone wants to think too much about compliance on a Thursday evening. But obviously the apprenticeship programs have different requirements to the average program. So that kind of impacts on how application works and enrolment works in particular, which is probably what's most on your mind. So I think that the key things to sort of bring to your attention are really around kind of being an English resident and having a supportive employer. So the application's slightly different in that we're looking for evidence of that. And there are other kind of particulars, particular requirements of apprenticeship programs that we're also addressing through enrolment. So things like having met functional skills criteria, we're asking for evidence of that, which I think can feel quite odd, you know, when you're kind of you're looking at master's programs, to be asked about things like your GCSE attainment. But we are where we are, and if we can kind of gather evidence of that, we can move past it quickly. And if you need to address that requirement over the course of a program, we can work with you. So importantly, that isn't an obstacle. It's just kind of making sure that we have evidence and can work with you on it if we need to. So thinking about kind of what the process looks like, there's an additional layer of application that we run through our a separate platform. So it's called PICS, but effectively it's a portal to collate the kind of material that relates to apprenticeship eligibility in particular. It's relatively painless, hopefully, anyway, and we can support you with that. And I would really encourage you to bear that in mind if you're kind of going through the process and thinking, I don't know if I'm doing this right, or I've uploaded the wrong document, or I've filled in some of the form wrong, is that you can work with us to correct it. So I wouldn't want that to be a kind of an additional area of anxiety as you're pulling your documentation and your application together. Just talk to us if you're not sure, or if there's something that you need to work with us on. That's not a problem at all. So yeah, additional requirements, but so these additional kind of evidence needed at enrollment stage, but hopefully painless, and we can help you if you find it to be otherwise. So just thinking about kind of the longer program and how compliance is sort of underlaying or underpinning everything. So the nature of the program is very different, which has its advantages, right? Which is around kind of having access to apprenticeship funding and that kind of thing. With that comes evidence requirements, because we're using public money, essentially. So there are kind of these requirements that underpin the whole thing. So we can address that very easily. And what we are trying to do is at induction and really early is to kind of establish that straightforwardly, so that it doesn't kind of loom too large in your apprenticeship learner journey. So things like kind of gathering evidence that you are engaging with the program. So those off-site days or off-the-job days or job hours that Tim made reference to, it's just sort of slowly collating evidence of that, so you're not having to do it in a mad rush at the end. It's continuing to kind of keep that apprentice, university provider and employer relationship really key. So there's a requirement around, we call them quarterly reviews. So it's basically getting all three parties round a table, real or virtual, and discussing progress. It's a really good opportunity for anyone to raise what's going well, what's maybe, you know, needs some attention, and having a really good practice around that established from the beginning keeps that from becoming a challenge. So just establishing good habits, really. So all of these are things that kind of in an average part 2 or part 3 that is not an apprenticeship would not be a requirement, but is very much woven into the apprenticeship program. And then as we get nearer the end, it's confirming things like, have you met the correct number of hours that the apprenticeship program kind of expects? Are you feeling confident in your knowledge and your skills and your behaviours that you've picked up over the course of the program? And are you ready to proceed to kind of completion, or what we would call an endpoint assessment, so that final assessment at the end? So there's a kind of a layer of administration, I suppose, that sits around the apprenticeship that my team will work with you on, again, to make as painless as possible, she says confidently. But we're a very nice bunch. So if you find that you're looking at the application or you're proceeding with your application and you would like some clarification about the documentation, about funding arrangements, drop us a line. And if you do join us and you have sort of similar questions around compliance matters, those exciting compliance matters, do just drop us a line. We'd be very happy to talk to you. But that's it from me, really. Happy to take any questions in the Q&A if anyone has any. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Andy. My name's Lucy and I'm part of the enrolment team here at the Institute of Continuing Education. So as part of the enrolment team, we're here to answer any questions that you may have regarding support all the way up to enrolment. If you have any other questions until, you know, the end of this session, please feel free to either use our QR code, or if you'd rather get into contact with us using our email address. So that's questions@ice.cam.ac.uk. But we also understand this is quite a lot to remember. So if you forget any of this, you can just go onto the course page, and on the right hand side, there's an ask a question button. So if you'd like to press that, it will also take you to our inquiry form. And that's all from me. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. So I think it's time now to open the questions and answers. We have a couple of questions in the chat that have been sent our way. One of the questions will be for Gregor. This one's for you. Did you find that working in London and studying in Cambridge worked well? I'm currently living in London and I'm interested in how living in London while doing the apprenticeship works for you.
I would say it's well, it's as easy as a train ride, I suppose. I suppose in terms of like travel, residentials typically start on a Monday, but we have the kind of Sunday nights accommodation at the college. So I mean, quite often I see peers at St Pancras Station getting on the same train as me at the same time on Sunday evening. So yeah, if you can get to St Pancras, or I'm sure there are other trains that go to Cambridge, it's as easy as that. Pack for 2 weeks, as if you're going on holiday, and yeah, that's kind of it really. I think you know, there've been a few times that Tim, for example, has come to our office here to have a quarterly review. So yeah, proximity is kind of not really an issue, I think, with between London and Cambridge.
Thank you, Gregor. I'm afraid that we won't have much more time for questions. Some questions that came through, we will make sure that we respond to those following the event. Tim, anything that you want to add? You're on mute, Tim.
Actually, just simply a word in answer to one of the other questions that came
Yes.
up. Do you need to have an RIBA a member in order to mentor an apprentice? We do have several apprentices from offices where there aren't any. It wouldn't be the RIBA, with the ARB, in fact, it would be a registered architect. But that we have had situations where we have one apprentice, for example, who works for one of the county fire services, where she's the only one with any architectural education in her office. What we do in these situations is that we ask them to find a registered architect mentor who can contribute to the quarterly reviews, which are regular progress reviews that we hold, and also to add some comments onto the PEDR, the logbook that architects need to qualify. So yes, it can be done. It has been done. It's been done very successfully, and we're used to it. So that was it. I think that's the point I think that I'll conclude on. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. We hope you found this session very informative. If there are questions that we haven't answered, you can contact us and we will try to go through them anyway and answer them after the event. And we would love to hear from you, your thoughts about how this event went. So a satisfaction survey will be emailed to all of you shortly, and we will appreciate if you could give us your feedback. So thank you once again for joining us, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.